Okay, problem number 8 on the final review says, which choice shows the solutions to the equation 8x squared plus 3x equals -7? Now this is a quadratic equation, and we this year covered 3 methods for solving quadratic equations. We could use completing the square. That's where you put it in vertex form and solve using square rooting both sides. There's graphing, which is definitely the easiest way. You set this equal to 0 and then look for where it crosses the x-axis. And that's the easiest way if the solutions aren't complex. And then there's the quadratic formula, which is just sort of plugging the answers in. So I'm actually going to start with graphing. I'm going to add 7 to both sides and make this equal to 0. That's going to help me, even if I need to end up using the quadratic formula. Setting it equal 0 is the first step of that too. So I'm setting it equal to 0. I'm going to graph that. So I'm going to put it in my graphing calculator, whatever kind of graphing calculator you have. I put 8x squared plus 3x plus 7 into my graphing calculator, and I graph it, and here I look at it and it does not cross the x-axis. Doesn't cross the x-axis, so that means the roots are complex. So that doesn't give me enough information to actually solve it, but it does give me enough information to at least cross them off. If I know that the solutions are going to be complex, I know that they're going to have an I in them, right? So I can automatically say, just from that little bit of work, it's not C or D. It's not. It has to have an I in it because it didn't cross the x-axis, okay? So I know it has to be between these two at this point, which already that's a lot. If I just had to guess, that gives me a 50-50 chance instead of 1 in 4. And now I've got this easily ready for the quadratic formula. So I'm going to go ahead and now quadratic formula is opposite of b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. If this is equal to 0. And remember, here's a, here's b, and here's c. Right? All right, so the opposite of b is -3. Plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, right? All over 2a. So this is just substituting. And now it's just really an order of operation step. Opposite of b plus or minus the square root of 9 minus, say, 4 times 8 times 7. That's 4 times 8 is 32 times 7. You, of course, can use your calculator on this. 1422, so 224 all over 16. Now, I haven't quite gotten to the end of this, but it's always a good idea to kind of look back and forth between your answers and see how far you got. I'm already noticing that just right here between these two answer choices, this one has a -3 in the front over a positive 16. This one has a positive 3 in the front over a positive 16. So already I'm pretty sure, and this term, it's not really going to matter. They're the same. So really the big difference that they're testing you on right here is knowing whether you know the difference between, whether you remember that that's the opposite of B, right? So already I'm pretty sure it's A. But I'm going to go ahead and finish the problem just to kind of remind you how to finish this problem. The opposite, so opposite of 3, or -3, plus or minus the square root of 9 minus 224 is -215, all over 16. And then remember, when you have that negative under the square root, that's the same thing. We could break that up into the square root of -1. I'm going to bring that work over here. So that's the same thing as the square root of -1 times the square root of 215 all over 16. And the square root of -1, this is how they decided to handle those things. That we're calling I. It's an imaginary number. So I, square root of 215 over 16. Okay, so now we can see for sure that this matches up with A, which is our answer.